Welcome to the TELUS Originals DocTalks, a series of talks dedicated to craft, themes, and ideas behind TELUS Originals documentaries with the people behind and in front of the camera. I'm your host, Sabrina Ronnie Firminger, and this special episode will feature Jaye Simpson, the subject of I'll Tell You When I'm Ready, in conversation with Billy-Ray Belcourt. I'll Tell You When I'm Ready is something of a dance between documentary conventions and poetry. We learn about Jaye's lifelong reliance on art, in particular poetry, to heal from trauma, and we as audiences learn by experiencing Jaye's poetry ourselves. It's an impactful, startling, and stunning documentary that will linger in the hearts and minds and bones of the viewers long after the film's 14 minutes are over. Jaye Simpson is an Oji Cree Saulteaux Indigiqueer from the Sapo-Towayak Cree Nation. Jaye is a writer, advocate, and activist sharing their knowledge and lived experiences in hope of creating utopia. She is published in several magazines, among them Poetry is Dead, This Magazine, and Prism International, as well as several anthologies. Their first poetry collection, It Was Never Going to Be Okay, was shortlisted for the 2021 Relit Award and a 2021 Dane Ogilvy Prize finalist, while also winning the 2021 Indigenous Voices Award for published poetry in English. A Body More Tolerable is her second book of published poetry. Today, Jaye will be interviewed by their close friend, Billy-Ray Belcourt. Billy-Ray is from the Driftpile Cree Nation in Northwest Alberta. He is an assistant professor in the School of Creative Writing at the University of British Columbia. He is the author of 5 books, most recently, Coexistence, Stories. Jaye Simpson, Billy-Ray Belcourt, welcome to TELUS Originals DocTalks.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Okay. Firstly, how are you doing this morning, Jaye?
I'm doing good. How are you, Billy-Ray Belcourt? Or should I say Dr. Billy-Ray Belcourt?
I'm doing good. A little sleepy, but such is life on a Thursday morning. How are you feeling as the documentary becomes closer to being something that's circulating in the world?
Well, it's kind of nerve-wracking because this was all filmed a year ago. And I remember it's like all of the equipment and the gear in my house, and the shots that are filmed, they're like close-ups or like very intimate, but what was so weird was there was so little moving room. I could only move so much. And so there's been so much change happening where like I filmed this a year ago and now it's like inching closer and closer and closer to its like circulation date. And I have people in my DMs and my messages and my emails being like, hello, where is it? Where can I see it? And I was like, it's not out yet. I'm nervous, but also at the same time, I'm excited for people to see this. It's the first time I shared my foster care file. I've had a lot of people ask for it or to like engage with it, and I never let anyone. So I'm pretty nervous for people to physically or be able to like interact with it in a way.
Yeah, I should say it's an incredibly beautiful documentary. Really moving, startling, as the host said, surprising. So much vitality, both in the way that you perform and also in how it's shot. But I thought before we get into the nitty gritty, how did the documentary come into being? And did you have any trepidations when you were first approached to be a part of it?
So the documentary came into being via some Instagram DMs. I got a, I got a message from the producers of Salazar Film, and they were like, "Hey, sending you a DM," and I was like, "Okay." I didn't reply for a little bit, and then Haley sent a DM, and I was like, "Okay, here we go. Here's an Indigenous person who I'm more likely to talk to about." And I was like, "Are you sure you want to make a documentary about me? I'm just me." And the producers were like, "Well, we had a laundry list of Indigenous folks we were thinking about." One of them also being you, Billy-Ray. And they were like, "But also all of them are so busy." And they were like, "Our schedules might align more, but also your poetry is captivating." And Jeff from Salazar had gone to several of my readings before the pandemic, and he also had been in Massey Books at the same time that the both of us were in. And he was like, he told me, he was like, "I was fascinated because here are these two writers and they're giggling between the bookshelves." And, they're like, "I'm bumping into them at coffee shops, but I'm too nervous to say hi to them. And they're always just like giggling and laughing." And he said it was like looking into like something that like felt like shouldn't be for him, but something that we were just sharing by being together in public. And initially he kind of wanted to have the documentary touch a little bit on the Indigenous writing community and how like there's like back when everyone used to live here before, you know, you moved from Edmonton and everyone moved to Edmonton, our writing community, because there was a fascination with like the fact that we were all like writing together, doing readings together, sharing our works together, and there was a want to kind of explore that. And then in the initial like treatment interviews, Haley, who is an amazing director and filmmaker, was like, "I kind of want to shift this. There's a different story here," and that's how it changed and began. And you know, look what an Instagram DM can do.
We're really in that age where an Instagram DM could be the best thing that happens to you
Or the worst
thing that happens.
Hey, girly.
Maybe we could say a bit about our friendship. So, I mean, I always say that we had a codependent pandemic friendship because, well, we were already friends. I had moved to Vancouver in November 2019. We already knew about each other, and we're, you know, Twitter mutuals. And then, you know, the pandemic hit, and outside of, you know, our partners, we were the only other contact in the world. And we spent a lot of time together. We would play video games, and we'd go to the bookstore, and we'd go to, you know, cafes, and probably look like, I mean, maybe the producer's story about us confirms my sense that when people see us, it's like we're in our own little world.
And we do act like that. I'm not gonna lie. We never should that.
When someone's gonna hear us like spilling tea in the bookshelves that are in the, you know, in the aisles at Messy Books, and but whatever. But that's funny. That's funny to think about our larger friend group being a kind of like ethnographic curiosity, because it is unusual to have a group of friends, especially around our age, that are all writers and all published and all have a certain degree of you know, cultural importance.
It is quite curious, because, you know, some like all of us are published, some of us are filmmakers, some of us are like visual artists with like gallery installations, and then they're like, you know, I'm aware that some people like will perceive that. But then also at the end of the day, some of us are barely 30, and like we're just like still goofing around and still wanting to like just like, I don't know, like not be kids, but like live our life. Like,
Totally.
you know, and when we're all together, we do act like we're in our own world because we had to make one, like we had to in order to survive the horrors of modern day. So what if we giggle?
To go back to the documentary, I was curious if, like, during the filming process, there were any unexpected sources of enrichment or nourishment. Like, did the any part of the filming process free you a little? Or I just watching the documentary, it feels like we're seeing the whole like emotional landscape that is Jaye Simpson.
Yeah, there's a lot I haven't shared or didn't share beforehand because that was mine and it was for no one else but myself. But I also, like, part of my biggest fear in sharing some of those like deaths was that there would be this like pity that wasn't mine, and I'm not asking for pity, and so I had a lot of apprehension. It hurt a lot to film the scene with my file, all nearly 5,000 pages of it, and I think we can see like the stack of paper in the documentary, and some of the more enriching moments during that film day was like Haley and Diana like really taking the time, and like at one point we had to stop because Haley was crying, and then at one point we had to stop because Diana was crying, and then I was crying throughout it, but you know, tears are money makers. But it was like very, very, very vulnerable. But then we took a break, and I got to walk to go grab like, you know, my usual coffee order at Turk's. And I got to just like sit at Grandview Park for a little bit where I got a couple baby photos. And I got to take a little deep breath and then come back. And it was like one of those moments where it was like, okay, like it just confirmed that this wasn't an extraction process. It was a like revelation, and that there was some very vulnerable but like potent work being done, and there was a lot like that was a nearly 10-hour shoot day, and so filming was exhausting, and there was like 9 hours of like footage captured from my file, and so there's like a lot that never made it into the documentary, and I'm kind of glad. I'm kind of a little grateful that there was some parts not there, and that like Haley and Diana and the team were like, that's a little bit too personal, and like, you know, Jay might not like that, and like the editing process, like it was a very enriching experience, except for when it was pouring rain and I had to keep on doing reshoots and I was wearing all jeans. That's the only moment where I was
like, I'm sinking into the earth.
Yeah, I was like, I'm soaking wet and I want to not be soaking wet. No, everything was so beautiful and freeing, and I'm really excited for people to engage and interact with this. Yeah.
So you mentioned the fear of a documentary about you being possibly extractive, and that's totally real because as we know, one of the main ways that mainstream media has related to Indigenous people throughout the 20th century and into the 21st century is as objects of, emotional objects from which to extract something, not to the benefit of Indigenous people, but to non-Indigenous people's curiosities.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if you had any thoughts to share about, like, when something like a documentary is community focused or is interested in, like, Indigenous freedom and flourishing, like, why is that important? What are some tips for filmmakers?
I think, in my experience, seeing the ways in which Indigenous peoples are a resource to be extracted from, that like fuels this weird emotional car that folks need to somehow drive and process and move their own feelings because they're so, clogged up and culturally broke. Line of credit denied. I think having something that's more community focused and like taking into account the subject's experiences, but then also the larger audience, because who's going to see this, attends to the needs that it's a reciprocal relationship. And I think that's the biggest part that I would have to say as like a tip or like a hint to filmmakers is that the reason why I was able to go into some of the parts where I go to in the film is because of my relationship with Haley, and because I trusted Nathan and Jeff, and I trusted Diana, and there was that kind of relationship. And like, even though the film has wrapped, the filming has wrapped like over a year ago, I still saw them, once a month. Like I've hung out with Haley a lot. Like we're really good friends now, and we go for dinner and we go for lunch and we check in, and we just like, that relationship is like long standing. And I think that's a big thing in like our communities, where people will come in to either write about us or film us or observe us and stuff, and they'll build these temporary relationships, and then they'll leave. That they've gotten what they wanted, and then they never come back. And so I think that's something that really inhibits that kind of like community orientation. But then you can also tell when that relationship is genuine. And so I think moving in this kind of work, you have to be anti-capitalist, because your payoff is not going to be what some folks want. And, not all, I was about to say something shady, but I'm not going to. We are not in a world of our own.
I do want to go back to vulnerability, because something that always surprises me a little when I do a reading, and then when I'm interacting with the audience, and someone out of, a genuine place says something like, "Thank you for your vulnerability." And I'm kind of just like, I'm just talking about my life. Like, this is just, what's going on and how I write about it. It doesn't always feel like I'm not putting myself in that place of vulnerability, but people's perceptions of what I'm doing then puts me in that place. Like, I think there's a subtle difference there that matters. But I guess I just bring this up to hear what you have to say about vulnerability and performance, and, sharing one's past, the emotional knowledge.
I reserve my true vulnerability to my friends and my therapist. um, what I share when I read poetry or with my art, there is a vulnerability there, but it's a vulnerability that's been edited and processed and one that like I've dealt with. I've done the work. I've, um, you know, spun straw into gold, so to speak, with it. But also it's time and place. I suspect I will read certain poems and people will come up and be like, wow, that was so breathtaking and vulnerable. And I'm like, I have that practically rehearsed. I know when to croak my voice. At this point, it's something that I'm putting on in order to move the audience, or to teach a lesson, actually, to humanize these experiences that people are reading on the headlines, and they can't even fathom it because they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that would happen. And sometimes it's to grant those headlines dignity because there are people behind them and people who are experiencing them. And I share some of those experiences and I can only speak on my own. And I don't think that's vulnerable to do. I think it's actually more like, I don't want to say brave because I hate when I get called brave. You're so brave. Oh, I woke up and I hit snooze 4 times. I think it's more like a responsibility. If I have this gift and I have this ability to be a conduit for this, I am responsible to ensuring that we exist in the canon and we exist truthfully. And so that's what I would actually be like complimented for, rather than being like, oh my God, I'm so glad you survived this horrific thing.
Maybe this relates to the title, which I wanted to ask you about. I'll tell you when I'm ready. How did you all land on that title? What does it represent?
I didn't name it. I think Jeff, Haley, and Nathan, they came up with it because I kept on saying, I'll tell you when I'm ready. And I kept on like being like, oh, when I'm ready, like, like I'll let you know, like, and then like I would let them know, and they were like, that's such a good title because this girly pop, like, don't rush her, like, when the time is right, the time is right, and when it's happening, it's really happening, and so I think it was like such a beautiful title to be like bestowed upon this project, because it's like you can't rush perfection. It's going to be late. Even if it's late, it's going to be late, but what you're going to get is more than what you asked for, and it's going to be like a feast, and it's going to be beautiful and heart-wrenching and reviving and refreshing, and devious, and it's going to be abundance. And so I think that's where some of that came from. And the fact that I love to procrastinate.
I know from our conversations that you've always had filmic aspirations. Did you did you have a sense that one day there could be a documentary about you? Not in like a, not in a sense of like, oh, I'm so important, I need a documentary about me, but like in a sense of like that you were living a life that, it could be the subject of some kind of documentary, or did this catch you by surprise?
Is my camera? No, I'm kidding. I've been in like short little documentaries and snippets before. With like one of the first ones was with my friends Chris and Kendall from Queer Based Media, very lovely group, queer and trans operated, and we did a very similar documentary. Actually, no, it wasn't very similar. It was a little bit. And it some of it took place in Grandview Park, but that was before I realized some of the connections and some of the ties and some of the baby photos, and I knew that there was some interest in like my story, and there were some organizations that were like, how'd you make it from like foster care to being this person? Like, what's that story? What's like, we want to look into it. And I was like, okay, you can leave me alone. Thank you so much. But I don't think of myself as this like all important or like, XYZ. What I did realize is that by sharing this and opening up, it allows people to see me in a way that I've actually never let them see me. Because I can be, and I am larger than life, but also I am brash, and I am sharp, and I am firm, and sometimes unyielding when it comes to certain things. And this also shines a light and provides an opportunity for grace for me, where people are like, oh, Jay was kind of mean about this, but it was because I was being insensitive. Therefore, actually, Jay wasn't being mean, she was being firm. But I think I was hiding such a large part of my story in a way that I just didn't know how to talk about with poetry or drag. Like, doing it via documentary actually ended up being the most appropriate conduit and pathway to tell this part. And so I think it made me realize that like there's many ways to talk about things and do things. And it was something that I'm really grateful for. And also very scared for. But I was kind of like flabbergasted. I was like, why me? Like, why, I write my silly poems. I walk every single day to the same cafe. I read my book in the same park, and I perform in drag at the same venue every month. Like, why me? I'm living like pretty much a like NPC like tracking. Like I'm in the same four places.
Someone else is clicking the mouse.
Someone else is clicking the mouse. I'm saying the same things over and over and over again, but it ended up being not true. And there was so much more there that I thought.
Yeah. On the note of drag, so the documentary also gives us a glimpse into your drag persona and your drag life. We see, I think it kind of like straddled the threshold between the more performance-based aspect of it and also the sense of it as an extension of your other artistic and creative practices. Could you just talk a bit about, why it was important to showcase that?
I think a big part of the showcasing drag was to show the multitudes that I contain, and that there's so much more there. And that like this exploration of gender and performance is what led me in part back here. And that like my queerness couldn't be contained in the city that I was living in, and it wasn't safe. And so I came back. But then because of this, I came back to the exact same neighborhood where I was born and like was partially raised in. And there were these like threads that became undeniable, where there was like a direct attachment to drag and my mother, but then also drag and my poetry and my poetry and my mother, and also the physical place I'm living with like the physical place where I was. And it felt like this really intrinsic web of like, I am here. And it was really fascinating. And like when we were going through it, like the whole team was like, this is just wild. Like, this is just like, you know, it's all connected and it's all together. But also at the same time, like, here is some joy that, like, you know, Persephone is moving hundreds of people and then immediately giggling in the background and jumping with her friends and running around, and then also somehow teleporting and changing outfits in less than 30 seconds, running around. And the poem that's interspersed with the documentary is from a conversation with my aunt. And one of the lines is like, you know, Jules is always changing her clothes. And so it just became this like this like weaving that fit everything, and it felt really good. And I'm really glad that my drag got to be a part of that.
Was it only during the filming where you all had that moment, that aha moment, where you're like, oh, all of this is connected in this, you know, beautiful and heartbreaking way?
It clicked as like the last couple filming days, and we were like, whoa. And it was just like beyond us. And then the team was like, Jay, you're kind of a witch, because for some odd reason, things you touch just like fit in and move. And I was like, I think I just like, we find places of comfort and memory, and I must have remembered these places, and you know, it's what brought me back. And like I do, like sometimes when I'm walking down the drive, I'll get a flash and be like, that wasn't that. And I walk down the drive and I see my aunt and like some of the other aunties in the community, and they're like, oh, you look just like so and so. And I was like, well, that's my mom. And I think like it all moved and fit into place as it needed to, as it was happening. And we were all like, this is getting a little weird. But then it turned out to be so beautiful. And there was a lot of like care and like fluidity as it was all happening.
And what did like self-care look like during that filming process?
I went on a lot of little walks, like little 5-6 minute walks, especially while they were setting up a new scene, in like either the kitchen or the bedroom. Like that took about 30 minutes. And so I'd be like, okay, I'm going to go for a little walk. And there was like equipment everywhere. And so it was like a little bit difficult to be in my own home, because my home is like essentially a long hallway. So I went to Turks a lot, or like, because it's like, you know, it's a 30-40 minute like tear down, reset up. And so I would just like either go to Turks or Havana, and I would just like sit there, read my book, like socialize a bit, and then I would head back. And it was like just me doing what I needed to do. Anytime I wanted a break, they would let me have a break. No. Hey, I'm so sleepy. I would have a nap from time to time. Like if I was sitting in a spot, like in the living room or in the bedroom, and we were doing teardown, I was like, okay, like, shake me up, like, wake me up. And also at the same time, it just like, I was also being cared for by the team. So it like, I didn't have to rely so much on self-care.
Yeah.
Which was really nice.
Because I was thinking about, like, the analogy I was drawing as I was watching the documentary and thinking about it was, when I'm teaching, I sometimes assign difficult material. And I have to carve out space in a classroom for people to hold those difficult feelings without it being an experience of like re-traumatization. And I think it's difficult to do. And I've been in many spaces where a facilitator or whatever is not able to do that, like hold open that space. And obviously I don't know all the time if I've succeeded or not. Mm-hmm. But I think like there is a way that the documentary and how it's structured, like I think it does that really nicely. Like we're sort of like eased into this very vulnerable space. And I guess I'm just curious about like how you saw that unfolding, or, was it not until you saw the actual edited film? I'm guessing that's partly work of like an editor in conversation with the director.
I didn't know it was going to be in 3 parts, which I think really worked out. I knew I should have grabbed coffee before this. The 3-part function, I think, really worked well because it's also not a beginning, middle, or end. Like, it's very like cyclical. Yeah. But it does end in a way that wraps it up really tenderly and beautifully, much like my first book. Where like as I was sharing with the team, like how when I tell my story, if I'm going to bring someone to hell, I am then responsible for bringing them back. Like, like the fairy person on the river Styx. I like my mythology. There has to be a level of trust where, like, if I bring someone down to the place where my story exists and where I, in part, have existed, there are a lot of people who have similar experiences or have had experiences that were much more horrifying in certain aspects because no one's trauma or existence is the same. But there are a lot of folks that I am accountable to them when they decide to go on this journey with me, and so I am accountable to bring them back. And I work very hard on it, and I have failed before, and it's what led me to be so like resolved to do this kind of work. Because I've also been the person in the audience having a panic attack and being stuck in a place where I didn't want to be. I think Haley as a director and her vision and what she wanted to kind of come into, she did a really, really, really impressive job with that, especially working with the editors and the producers to form this final product that touches on a lot of this stuff and goes into it, but then brings us back within seconds, which I find really impressive. So it takes me a couple minutes to bring people back. But I think I didn't have a lot to do with that kind of like storytelling aspect, they did that, and it's astounding and very impressive, and I'm very proud of them.
If there's going to be a part 2 for the documentary, what direction would you take it?
Well, part 1 has so much. It's got like, this childhood aspect of me, with my Legos or my Bionicles, and it's got my books and everything. I think part 2, if there were to be one, would go into, I think, dive more into my relationships with other places and people. Like, I would love to have included parts with, like, some of my partners, and some of the more like mundane frustrations, like, they're out of my favorite oat milk, or go into like the cheesy bits where I have all of the Glee DVDs, or me in the garden, like actually gardening, like a new poem and a different drag outfit. And I think maybe also getting into like this, like, I'm in this era of like rage, and where like I'm just very angry at the way some of the world is right now, and a lot of the hurt that is going on, and like very specifically in like our communities, there's still like so much happening and so much grief, and like, part 1 was like a love letter to my mother and the downtown east side, and I have so much love, but I'm angry. I'm getting to a point where I'm like, I want to just scream and communicate how hurt I am by so many other people who are eating the downtown east side alive. They're gobbling it for property, or they're gobbling it up for experience, or they're gobbling it up for grants, and they're going to put it in their land acknowledgement, but then not acknowledge the children of the downtown east side and why they're so upset. And I think part 2 would be a manifesto of like demanding people stop lip service. What do you think?
I can see even like this, like your second book of poetry, which comes out in the fall of 2024, called A Body More Tolerable. I could see that being even like an anchor point.
Yeah, I think so too, because It Was Never Going to Be Okay is kind of an anchor point for I'll Tell You When I'm Ready as well. In some parts, yeah. But yeah, my second book of poetry is very angry. I have a lot of anger. I've got a lot of feelings now. Yeah.
I guess I only have a couple more questions left, and one of them is about the downtown east side, and like how difficult and tricky it can be to try to intervene in the history of how it's been portrayed. And, you wanting to like reclaim that space as a space of love and continuity and ancestry.
I have a poem called Urban Indians in the Downtown East Side, and one of the last lines is the mythos was fabricated, because it was, and it is, because people are scared of things they don't know. And if what they see is what they see, they're going to just believe whatever they're told. It's like Plato's allegory to the cave. They're going to look at the shadows, and someone's going to say, that is a tree. Sorry, it's an illusion of light. I was told all of these things about the downtown east side, but I have never seen more Indigenous folks in a place. I've bumped into so much of my biological family there. I walk down the street and I am not scared. If anything, I feel nothing but concern. Where's the housing? Where's the safe supply? Where's the food? Where's the humanity? Where's the decency? Where's the clean toilets? Like, where is the ability to care? We don't need more police in the downtown east side. We don't need that. The only reason why that's happening is because of all of these buildings and like new housing and luxury condos being built in this area. But when we look at the history of Vancouver and where people are placed, it's there. And the lack of policing at first is what led to the ability for Robert Pickton to do what he did, and so many other white men to enact harm on this community and on my kin. And so when I go to the downtown east side, which is a hop skip away from where I live right now, I get to see my aunts and my cousins. I get to see people who knew my mom, and I feel love. And if that's something that some folks can't recognize, then that's something they can't recognize. And what happens there is out of survival. I can't blame them. I can't blame anyone for what they have to do in order to survive, because it's life or death at that point. It's if they get to eat, and if they don't eat, they could perish. And so I think that's where I come from, and I refuse to throw anyone out in my community. And I think that shows in the company I keep as well. And I'm really proud of the downtown east side and the work and the art. Like, you will, like, the amount of poets that are there, the amount of writers that are there, and they've got notebooks on notebooks on notebooks, and they've got vision, and the art that they're making is just gorgeous. I think it's culturally one of the richest places in the city, and that's undeniable.
Mm-hmm. Okay, one of my other closing questions is, what do you hope audiences, leave the screening with? What do they take from the film?
I hope they take from it is that the world is so much smaller than we thought, and that people are getting to know this side because I originally was a voice and like an art form that was amicable to the everyday canon, and that I was at first bite-sized enough for people to be like, okay, yes, let's get her into the door. And then once I was in the door, I was like a monster. But because of that, like, my story isn't unique. Like, there are so many folks on the Drive, on Main Street, in the downtown east side, who have such similar stories and experiences. And to grant humanity to everyone, and that, like, being firm and sharp is sometimes a great kindness. Yeah.
What do you think the people closest to you how will it resonate with them?
Well, I've shown some friends some of it. Don't tell Jeff and or Charlotte. I showed some friends a little private screening, and they all were crying, and I had a very hard time not crying. And then a lot of them were like, it's nice that you're showing this part to so many other people that we knew. Like we've been aware of a lot of this, and there's so much beauty in there, and that like it's also such a like love letter to hear, because all of the musicians are local, and my friends, and so it's like I hope they also see it as like me opening a door to a part that I have been so apprehensive to share, but also that it is me allowing folks in, and that I hope I don't regret it.
Well, I think that it, just demonstrates what so many of us who love you know, which is that you have such a dynamic presence, and you really light up a room, which is probably how the director or the producers first, you drew them in just by simply, inhabiting space in the way that you do.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was lovely to chat with you about this documentary. Again, I think it's really lovely, and I hope tons and tons of people see it.
Thank you so much, Billy-Ray.
Thank you both for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
And thank you to our viewers and listeners. Thank you for listening and watching TELUS Originals DocTalks, and to our guest, Jaye Simpson, and today's interviewer, Billy-Ray Belcourt. Watch TELUS Originals documentaries at TELUS Optik TV Channel 8, and watch.telusoriginals.com, and follow us at TELUS Originals on Instagram. DocTalks are a production of TELUS Originals. This episode was produced by Sharon Bradley with technical support by Matt Waterworth. Ken Soy is the production executive for TELUS Originals DocTalks. DocTalks are produced on the traditional and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations.